Kumler about Gemara, we are Mitzay Rosh Hashanah. We're up to Daf Lamed Vav Amid Aleph. Actually, it's same medallia. We're up to Daf Lamed Vav Amid Aleph in the Gemara here, and we went through all the sources for time-bound mitzvahs that women are exempt, and all the exceptions where they're actually obligated to do the mitzvah, and went through all the timeless mitzvahs. And also the negative mitzvahs that women are chayiv. So we are up to the Gemara, the Flamed Bov, Amid Aleph. We're just about to begin. So the Gemara is towards the bottom of the page, and about 5 lines above the white lines. When we're asking Bein la Abaya, Bein la Rava, it doesn't matter which opinion of you, Abaya or Rava, that they learned the exemption of women from different psukim. And so what do they do? Bonim atem. What do they do with the pasuk where it says Bonim atem Hashem lekechem, like it's going to do, you're Hashem's children, don't tear your flesh out with implements and all that, and don't pull your hair out because you're a holy nation. So what do they do with that pasuk? Because they were explaining Isa in a different way. So what do they do with the pasuk Bonim atem? So very interesting, and we're digressing here. I'm a baila. We need for the following very interesting argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. Look at the Tanya, we learned, it says in Pasuk, Boni matem l'Hashem alekechem, that you're Hashem's children. So what he says follows. This man, shatem neigim boni, if you behave like a child to a parent, which means you're obedient and you're compliant, atem kurim bonim, you're called Hashem's children. Ein atem neigim meaning bonim, if you don't follow the way children, in other words, you're not behaving the way you're supposed to, you're not comporting yourself properly, ein atem kurim bonim. Hashem will no longer treat you like Hashem's child. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Quite strict, quite harsh. Rameir says, "Benkach atem krim bonim." You're always called Hashem's children. Remember, it says, and he brings a number of psukim. What's interesting in brachas, Rameir had neighbors who were Rishoyim, and he wanted to destroy them. And his wife Bruya said to him, "It says Yitamu chatoyim in haaretz, that the sins should be destroyed, but lo chaytim, not the sinners." And here you see that Rameir made a 180-degree turnaround. So his wife obviously influenced him, and said that a person, no matter how they behave, they're always, at the end of the day, Hashem's children. And how do we know that? Shneimar, it says, Bonim escholim hema. They are foolish children. And there's another passage where it says that Bonim le'emun bam. They're children who don't really follow them or don't believe in them. It says, Zera mereim, that the children or the seeds of bad is Bonim mashchisim, are children who are destructive. It says, instead of them saying we're not part of Hashem's nation, tell them that you are the children of Hashem. Now, what's going on here? What are all these psukim that we are bringing to support Rameir? In the pasuk it says foolish children. They're called children, even though they're foolish. They sin. So you'll argue, okay, if they're only foolish, they make mistakes, it's not deliberate, it's not in spite, they're still Hashem's children. If they don't believe in Hashem, then maybe they're no longer called his children. But it still refers to them as banim who don't believe. So even they're not really big believers, they still call Hashem's children. Okay, they don't really believe, but they actually worship idols. Then definitely they're not called children. Toshma, we bring a passage. The children of bad, they're destructive children, and destructive children generally means avodah zarah. And we find Rashi brings Tzukim where he uses the expression tashchisim when it talks about avodah zarah, and yet they are called banim mashchisim. You can argue banim mashchisim in the Mikri. They're called destructive children. Okay, they're children, but they also come with an adjective, destructive. But you wouldn't call them good children. Instead of saying that you're children, that you are, some other nation, you should say that you are God's children. There's no other descriptive term that you use, just b'nei, the children. However, sorry. Yeah, but the first one we would have thought they're called Bani Mashchisim. We found another pasuk, they're not even Mashchisim. Now the big machlek is Rashi says over here, what we're talking about here is dafke if they did tshuva. When we say that they tshuva, we would have thought that even though they did tshuva, they're still called Bani Mashchisim because of their past. And we bring a pasuk, no. Look at Rashi. B'nei ma'al mikra oila forever. And so being a pasuk, Toshma the hadri mikmei ayidei tshuva. Others say no, that the whole point of made is that even they did not do tshuva, and even they worship idols, at the end of the day, they're God's children. And they God's children, and Mashiach will come, and Rashi says, in Chumash, Hashem will have to take each one by the scruff of the collar and yank them and pull them out of Golus, every single one of them. Because everybody's Hashem's children. Fascinating argument here. And then Machlekes between Rashi and others, even if someone, while they committed the worst possible sins, are still called Hashem's children. Says the Mishnah. We're talking about excuse me, difference in men and women. So hasmicha is, if you remember in Chagiga, we learned the very first argument amongst Jewish rabbis was whether women are soimches, reshusana, they can do smicha. Smicha is when you have an animal, you bring a carbon, you lean on the head of the animal, the whole koicha with all your kayach. Whether women have that obligation or they're allowed to, so hasmichas, leaning on the animal. Women don't. Hatunufas, waving the animal, or waving certain things, you don't. You wave sometimes the foreleg and the chest of the animal. You don't. We even have by nose as well. The hagoshas, bringing the carbon mincha next to the mizbeach, they don't. The hakmitzas, by a carbon mincha flower offering that they scoop out, the 3 fingers there and they put that on the mizbeach. Women don't. The haktoiris. We're talking about a woman, even though she's a kohenes. So l'chayda, you would think that these are some of these activities she can do. We say no, and because the haktoides, and so to going through his bech and roasting it. But malika is what you do to a bird, which is like shchita by an animal. Here you use your long nail. Bakaboles, and receiving the blood and taking it, including walking toward the mizbeach, v'hazoyes, and the spraying of the blood. Noiheges, you have different kinds of spraying. You spray either, by a bird, you stand there and you squeeze the blood out of the mizbeach, or by an animal, it's called zrika, because you take it, put it in a vessel, and then you spray it from the vessel onto the corners of the mizbeach. All of these, noihagim benoshim, anoshim lebenoshim, they're all by men and not by women. Chutz. So we're just learning the Mishnah, another difference in men and women, that in regarding the avodah, a kohenes, she does not do the avodas of the kohen when she goes to the Beis HaMikdash. All of these, smicha, waving, bring it to mizbeach, sprinkling, kmitza, malika. Chutz, the only exception is minchas seita. Only exception is by a minchas seita. And by Nazidis, I want that they waive their own mincha, whether she's a Bas Kohen or whether she's a Bas Yisrael, makes no difference. Because their mincha needs to be waived, they do that, Shehein Minifus. Face that simple question. These women, let's say she's a Bas Kohen, but we know that a Kohen who is not wearing the Arba B'godim, the 4 clothing, is disqualified from doing any avodas in the Beis HaMikdash. So how can you even think that a woman can do these avodas? Even she can, but she's not wearing her garments. The Tais gives 2 answers. One answer is that she's wearing the 4 garments. And the other answer is, when is it a problem if you're not wearing the 4 garments that you're disqualified? If you're a male that has a mitzvah with 4 garments, if you're missing it, then you're disqualified. Since a female does not have the mitzvah wearing 4 garments, then therefore if she's missing it, she is not disqualified. So all the Achrei talk about how can she put on the 4 garments is that we learned in the Chumash and Kisei, a woman's not allowed to wear a man's clothes. So some want to say that there are clothing that are very loose and therefore they're really non-gender, and therefore those clothes a woman can wear just like a man can wear, Others say that if the mitzvah was that a woman can do the avodah, then she has to wear clothes. Then those clothes must have been made for both. Made for both of them because they both can do the service. But now that they cannot do the service, so then she therefore obviously the clothes are not for them. Says the Gemara, smichas. Then we go through each one. How do you know that a woman doesn't have the mitzvah? Smichas, leaning on the animal. The Chsiva says daber el bnei Yisrael. This samach. Bnei Yisrael saying bnei Yisrael. Only males and not females. This is the Mishnah we had in Chagiga. They're the argument. Tanufas, and we list all the different generations we all argue. Tanufas waving. Daber el bnei Yisrael says speak to the Eden. The Hanif, and they should wave. Bnei Yisrael many Bnei Yisrael many, only males, not females. Hagoshes approaching the mizbeach with the mincha. The chesiv zayis teres mincha. Hakriv oisa bnei Aaron, let the children of Aaron bring it to the mizbeach. Bnei Aaron will bnei Aaron. Again, the males, not the females. Kimitzas, scooping out the 50 fingers by a card by flour offering. The chesiv says v'via bnei Aaron becomes bnei Aaron becomes bnei Aaron bnei Aaron. So we dashen bnei Aaron, only the males, not the females. Haktoras taking it to the mizbeach and roasting it. The chesiv says we're talking about a bas koine. The key to is bnei. Every time it says bnei Adam, it says bnei Adam will live bnei son. Hamalikas, the chesiv says umolak v'hikid. It says whoever does a malika should then take it to his bech and roast it. Hiskish malika laktora. So whoever can roast into malika, and we already said that women cannot roast. It says the key to is bnei Adam. Hakabolus receiving the blood. The chesiv hikriv bnei Adam. We learned the hikriv the kabbalah sadam. This is receiving the blood. Hazoy says the Gemara. Hazoy, if we say sprinkling, what kind of sprinkling are we talking about where we disqualify women? Either potter, are we talking about the potter aduma when you sprinkle towards the base of Mikdash? Other kasaba. It says clearly there that the Kohen Gadol other did the potter aduma, which means that not only are women disqualified, even Kohenim are disqualified. It has to be the Kohen Gadol. Actually, it's a machlekes, but that's Gemara saying follow the Kohen Gadol. Either are we talking about sprinkling it, say, on the pareiches, for example, or the inner mizbeach? But for example, a kohen, for kohen, the kohen who is anointed of sin has to bring a bull, their own offering. Or if the entire community committed a sin, a par hell and simmer, you have to sprinkle it on the pareiches. If that's what we're talking about, it says clearly in the pasuk, HaKohen HaMashiach kasaba. Not even ordinary kohenim couldn't go ahead and spray it. It has to be after the kohen was anointed. So what do you have to tell me that a woman cannot do it? Even kohenim, male kohenim can't do it. Ela hazod ben oif. We're talking about the dam oif. We're talking about a bird. And it says by a bird that you should take the bird and squeeze the blood out onto the mizbeach, onto the corner of the mizbeach. I want to say that women cannot do that. And because how, since by an animal it says v'zorka b'nei Aaron, by bird we say also a woman cannot do that. And it goes as follows: the ben tzoin, ma ben tzoin shalakavul l'kohen. When it comes to a tzoin, it doesn't have to be a kohen who shafts it. Anybody, it's only from the receiving of the blood onward that becomes an avodah that's designated for kohen. Anybody can do it when it comes to an animal, and yet when it comes to sprinkling, only a kohen can do that. So a ben oif, which is malika, and malika only a kohen can do. Otherwise, anybody else does it becomes straight. That it has to be a kohen who does a malika is ein surely, because it says vikiva kohen lemevech. Surely, when it comes to the sprinkling, it has to be dafka kohen. There are exceptions that you do waving there. Rabbi Yeshua said to Rabbi Yeshua his generation, there's a Tana called Rabbi Yeshua who always argues with Rabbi Nassan. He lived for a very long time, and they lived till the end of the Tanoim. Then you have an Amaydi here called this is actually Rabbi Lezer, an Amaydi, the student of Rabbi Yeshua, and he initially lived in the bubble. Then he moved to what do you call to Eretz. And he said to Rabbi Yeshua of his generation, not the Tana, but the Amaydi Rabbi Yeshua from his generation. He said to him, "Loi taste like Rashi says, Amaydi Kamosa, Amaydi like him. Loi taste of Akarach. Don't sit down. You need. I want you to explain to me the following subject in the Gemara. How do you know that Milchas Saita requires waving? So he said back to me, hold on. The Guvik says clearly the title. What are you asking me to know? It says by Hainivs and Mincha. It says clearly you should wave the Mincha. How do you know that she has to be involved? Maybe the Kohen can do the waving. So we answer, Asi, we learn out, Yad, Mishlami. Here it says, right? You should take the mincha from the hand of the woman. There it says, Yodav Tivayen. It says over there by they should bring the Shlami, means Makan Kohen of Lahal Kohen. Over here by the site, it's the Kohen who takes it from her. So over there by Shlamim, also it's the Kohen who takes it from the Yisrael. Malahal and Bailim. And just like over there, that the Bailim are the ones who wave it, Afkan Bailim. Here also it's the Bailim who wave it. When it says Yoda Tivayen, it's talking about waving and it's talking about the owner of the thing. So we compare the two, and that's how we know the Kohen and the owner have to be involved. Okay, so how can they both be waving it? Kohen machnes Yoda Tachas Yad Bailim. It. So the Bailim are holding the animal or the mincha, and the Kohen places his hand underneath. and they waive it. Ashkechan Saita, we know Saita. What about a nazir? How do you know that? As you will learn out, chaf misaita. It says here b'nazir la kapeha, and by another it says b'nazir la kapeha nazir. Taisa says that this has two shots in here. One shot is that actually the kohen, he wants to know, isn't the chatzitza if the kohen places his hand under the woman's. One is that's how it's done, so it's not chatzitza. But the other one is they're actually not touching each other. The woman places her hand underneath the mincha, and the kohen puts his on the side, on the bottom, and that's how those two together. That's why they hold the same shot. Taisa talking to two groups of people. He's talking to everybody, yeah. Okay, but the first answer is a kosev, and that's it. Says in the next Mishnah, kol mitzvah she tuluya ba'aretz, any mitzvah which is dependent on the land. Now, two ways of understanding the Mishnah: either depending on when they arrive, the advent to Eretz Yisrael, or it depends that it's agriculture. It has to do with land. We'll see in the Gemara. Ein el baretz. It's only in Eretz Yisrael. But it's ein tuluya ba'aretz. But any mitzvah which is not associated with land is no hegis bein ba'aretz b'chalad. That those mitzvahs apply anywhere in the world. Chutz, the exceptions. Orla is to do with land. The first 3 years you cannot have any benefit whatsoever, nor eat, nor have any benefit from what grows on the orla. And uklayim, and nor can you have any benefit from climb, and they're both to do with the land, and they both apply chutz la'aretz. And maybe that the Rabbanas will see. Once it's Eretz, it's only limited to Eretz Yisrael. That's what we're saying. Any mitzvah to do with Eretz Yisrael is only applies to Eretz Yisrael. No, Shluv Ba'aretz means earth. Then those mitzvahs only apply to Eretz Yisrael. But what do you mean by earth? Either when they arrived into the land of Eretz Yisrael, or that these are mitzvahs to do with land, with agriculture. And as we'll see, that the second shot is what we finally decide. That's the mission saying. Any agriculture mitzvah is only limited to Yisrael. Shemitah, Yovel, they're all at Yisrael. Truma, Maisris, except Orla and Klein, which will seem that the Machlek is the Rabbanan as well. But that may have some in the Rabbanan. Yeah, as we'll soon see. Rabbi says also the Isser Chodesh. Chodesh means any crop that took root after the second day of Pesach, he cannot eat from it till the following year after the second day of Pesach, because that's called Chodesh. You need the Omer to permit it. And that's why you see sometimes a bag that says, Kemach Yoshon, this is from the old flour, prior, so that it took root and it grew everything before the second day of Pesach, and then afterwards they took it and made it. Okay, just quickly the first few lines. My tuluya, my she'eni tuluya. What do you mean that to do with Eretz Yisrael? Those mitzvahs where the Torah starts off when you arrive. So those mitzvahs are limited to Eretz Yisrael because clearly links the two. But if it doesn't introduce that mitzvah that when you arrive at Yisrael, the like bia, if it doesn't say bia, then that applies also in chutz la'aretz. Well, then there's a question. The mitzvah tefillin, the mitzvah petach, which is that the first donkey also you have to redeem. The kaseh bia, and it says over there, it says when you arrive in Yisrael, and then it says that you should put on tefillin. And we wear tefillin chutz la'aretz as well. Fascinating Rashi here. Rashi says, how do I know that you have to wear tefillin? How do I know you have to wear tefillin? Maybe you don't wear tefillin chutz la'aretz. We find that people we find in Gemara different stories that they wore tefillin. That's the only way we know that you have to wear tefillin chutz la'aretz, which is pretty amazing. And then Taisa, in fact, goes further. Maybe tefillin is only midrabanan. How do we know wearing tefillin in the chutz la'aretz is from the Torah? Maybe it's only midrabanan. And Taisa doesn't argue that. Taisa says, even if you want to say that wearing tefillin in the chutz la'aretz is midrabanan, the Mishnah should have included it. If the Mishnah is talking about arriving in Israel, should have included it because Arla in chutz la'aretz is only midrabanan, and yet it's included as an exception. That's not limited to Israel. So we should have said tefillin also. So Taisa here seems to give an allowance, possibly that wearing tefillin in the chutz la'aretz is only midrabanan. It's quite amazing. Says the Gemara, it's not pshat in the Mishnah at all. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, hachikam, kol mitzvah. Any mitzvah which devolves on you personally, makes sense where you live. You have to do the mitzvah. Shabbos, kashrus, makes no difference. Choivas karka, any mitzvah which involves your land, ain't in a heges ela ba'aretz, only is limited to Eretz Yisrael. We'll stop over here. Tomorrow.